G.W. Clay, colored, 28, married, city. And so on, and so on. Great lumps were rising in Harvey's throat, and his stomach reminded him of the day when he fell from the liner. May 10th. Schooner We're Here. The blood tingled all over him. Otto Svensson, 20, single, city, lost overboard. Once more a low, tearing cry from somewhere at the back of the hall. "She shouldn't ha' come. She shouldn't ha' come," said Long Jack, with a cluck of pity. "Don't scrouge, Harve," grunted Dan. Harvey heard that much, but the rest was all darkness spotted with fiery wheels. Disko leaned forward and spoke to his wife, where she sat with one arm round Mrs. Cheyne, and the other holding down the snatching, catching, ringed hands. "Lean your head down, right down," she whispered. "It'll go off in a minute." "I can't. Don't. Oh, let me." Mrs. Cheyne did not at all know what she said. "You must," Mrs. Troop repeated. "Your boy's just fainted dead away. They do that some when they're gettin' their growth. Wish to tend to him? We can git out this side. Quite quiet. You come right along with me. Pshaw, my dear, we're both women, I guess. We must tend to our menfolk. Come." The We're Heres promptly went through the crowd as a bodyguard, and it was a very white and shaken Harvey that they propped up on a bench in an anteroom. "Favours his ma," was Mrs. Troop's only comment, as the mother bent over her boy. "How do you suppose he could ever stand it?" she cried indignantly to Cheyne, who had said nothing at all. "It was horrible, horrible. We shouldn't have come. It's wrong and wicked. It isn't right. Why couldn't they put these things in the papers where they belong? Are you better, darling?" That made Harvey very properly ashamed. "Oh, I'm all right, I guess," he said, struggling to his feet, with a broken giggle. "Must have been something I ate for breakfast." "Coffee, perhaps," said Cheyne, whose face was all in hard lines, as though it had been cut out of bronze. "We won't go back again." "Guess 'twould be 'baout's well to get down to the wharf," said Disko. "It's close in among with them Dagos, and the fresh air will fresh Mrs. Cheyne up." Harvey announced that he never felt better in his life, but it was not till he saw the We're Here, fresh from the lumper's hands, at Wouverman's wharf, that he lost his all overish feelings in a queer mixture of pride and sorrowfulness. Other people, summer boarders and such like, played about in cat boats or looked at the sea from pier heads, but he understood things from the inside more things than he could begin to think about. None the less, he could have sat down and howled because the little schooner was going off. Mrs. Cheyne simply cried and cried every step of the way, and said most extraordinary things to Mrs. Troop, who babied her till Dan, who had not been babied since he was 6, whistled aloud. And so the old crowd Harvey felt like the most ancient of mariners dropped into the old schooner among the battered dories, while Harvey slipped the sternfast from the pierhead, and they slid her along the wharf side with their hands. Every one wanted to say so much that no one said anything in particular. Harvey bade Dan take care of Uncle Salters's sea boots and Penn's dory anchor, and Long Jack entreated Harvey to remember his lessons in seamanship. But the jokes fell flat in the presence of the two women, and it is hard to be funny with green harbour water widening between good friends. "Up jibs and foresail!" shouted Disko, getting to the wheel as the wind took her. "See you later, Harve. Dunno but I come near thinkin' a heap o' you and your folks." Then she glided beyond earshot, and they sat down to watch her up the harbour, and still Mrs. Cheyne wept. "Pshaw, my dear," said Mrs. Troop. "We're both women, I guess. Like as not it'll ease your heart to hev you cry out. God he knows it never done me a mite of good, but then he knows I've had something to cry fer." Now it was a few years later, and upon the other edge of America, that a young man came through the clammy sea fog up a windy street which is flanked with most expensive houses built of wood to imitate stone. To him, as he was standing by a hammered iron gate, entered on horseback, and the horse would have been cheap at $1,000, another young man. And this is what they said: "Hello, Dan." "Hello, Harve." "What's the best with you?" "Well, I'm so's to be that kind of animal called second mate this trip. Ain't you most through with that triple invoiced college of yours?" "Getting that way. I tell you, the Leland Stanford Junior isn't a circumstance to the old We're Here, but I'm comin' into the business for keeps next fall." "Meanin' our packets?" "Nothin' else. You just wait till I get my knife into you, Dan. I'm goin' to make the old line lie down and cry when I take hold." "I'll risk it," said Dan, with a brotherly grin, as Harvey dismounted and asked whether he was coming in. "That's what I took the cable fer. But say, is the doctor anywheres around? I'll drown that crazy nigger some day, his one cussed joke an' all." There was a low, triumphant chuckle as the ex cook of the We're Here came out of the fog to take the horse's bridle. He allowed no one but himself to attend to any of Harvey's wants. "Thick as the Banks, ain't it, doctor?" said Dan propitiatingly. But the coal black Celt with the second sight did not see fit to reply till he had tapped Dan on the shoulder, and for the 20th time croaked the old prophecy in his ear. "Master, man. Man, master," said he. "You remember, Dan Troop, what I said on the We're Here?" "Well, I won't go so far as to deny that it do look like it as things stand at present," said Dan. "She was an able packet, an' one way an' another I owe her a heap her an' Dad." "Me too," quoth Harvey Cheyne. End of chapter. End of book. Thank you for listening.